Hi, this is Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter, and you're listening to Job Search Radio. You know, I've been doing this show for almost 2 years now, and we're coming up quickly on episode number 100, a huge milestone that when I started off on this journey, I never thought I would get to. Now, I've been freely giving information for a long time, and I'm going to ask you for a favor. If you have an iPhone, I want to ask you to subscribe to Job Search Radio in iTunes. Now, there are two instances of the show, and just look for the one that has a picture of one guy on it, and that's going to be my handsome face. So subscribe to Job Search Radio in iTunes, and now let me just tell you about my show. You know, finding work is not as easy as arriving at an interview and reciting a bunch of facts. It's a sales process where you as a sales professional, you as a job hunter, are selling the audience every step along the way that you're the best person for them to hire. That starts off before you write the resume with identifying and researching everything that you need to deliver to an employer. It continues on with the resume, with your LinkedIn profile, with your interviews, your salary negotiations. Every step along the way is a sales process, and that's what we're going to talk about on this show. Preparing yourself to sell. Preparing yourself and executing the sales plan. So I hope you enjoyed today's show, and please sing along.
Are you looking for a new job or interested in leveling up? Job Search Radio is your go-to resource for insider tips on job hunting and growing your career. Here's your host, Jeff Altman.
So my guest on this show is Hugh Liddle, who's the sales wizard. I love that title. The sales wizard at Elite Sales Academy and Redcap Sales Coaching, where I love this tagline as well. He makes selling easy, fun, and profitable. And look, he's got the red cap on today. Hugh, welcome to Job Search Radio. Great to have you.
Oh, thanks. It's wonderful to be here, Jeff.
Super. So, selling, job search? Come on. What's that all about? We don't sell when we job hunt. You know, we just give them a bunch of facts, right?
No, the truth of the matter is that you started selling just shortly after you came out of the womb. And you found out that by doing and saying certain things in certain ways that you got what you needed. And anytime that anyone is talking and having a conversation about anything that's important to them, they're in a sales conversation, whether they know it or not. I have to tell you that my wife, Priscilla, would be the first one to tell you, I'm not a salesperson. I don't like sales. I don't want to do sales. I could just never do that. That lady talked me into moving from Colorado to Florida, because it was something that was important to her. It was something that she wanted to do. And she gave me all kinds of really, really good reasons why we should move down here and why it was going to be to my benefit and how much a wonderful home she was going to make for us here and how we could go to the ocean on a regular basis and all those kinds of things. And then she asked me for the sale. She said, I'm moving to Florida. Do you want to go or not?
Hey, I got to say something. Is she related to Zig Ziglar's wife, the redhead?
She's not a redhead, but she probably is related. Absolutely. And the point of that story really is that we do sell. So when we are having a conversation with somebody that we may want to have hire us, we really might want to go to work for their company. That's something that's important to us. That's one of the most vital things that could happen to us in our lives potentially. So what we say and how we say it and how we sell during that conversation that we're having with the recruiter or with the interviewer or with the CEO of the company, whoever it is that we're talking with, is a sales conversation. Because we want to take that sales conversation to the point where we either say, yes, I want to work for your company, or no, I don't want to work for your company, and where the person that's interviewing us says, we'd like for you to come to work for our company, or I think we'll take a pass, you're probably not who we're looking for. And that's really what any sale is just getting to the point where somebody can say yes or no.
So interestingly, do you think there's a difference between how you would coach a sales professional to interview versus a non-sales professional interviewing?
I think that everybody, whether they're a sales professional or whether they're not, if they're looking for a job and they're going into that interview to talk with somebody who has the potential or the power to give them a job, that they need to approach it the same way, they need to do the same thing. And that means that they need to do some preparation. They need to know what they're going to say, how they're going to say it, when they're going to say it. And it needs to be very, very carefully planned out.
So preparation, what sort of prep do you think someone should do before the interview in order to be ready? I'm going to take down some notes because I want to make sure that there are things in the show notes for folks.
Great. I've been an interviewer in the past. I've done job interviews with people who were looking for jobs, and I wanted to hire somebody to be an assistant for me. And one of the things that was really interesting is that the majority of people who I interviewed asked me, well, what does your company do, and what's it about, and what would I need to do as part of this, being part of this company? And those are questions that you can very easily answer ahead of time just by going to that company's website, by Googling them, by looking at the history of the company, looking at the products and services that they make available, reading the About page. You can normally find information about companies on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. And if you do your research, you'll find out a lot about what that company does. And not only that, but what the company culture is. Very often they'll have their mission statement as a part of what they put on their website. You'll be able to find out about the people who run the company, who they are, what their background is, what they do. Very often department heads. Sometimes you even find information about everybody else that works for the company. So you can get a really good idea ahead of time of what they do. So when you go into the interview, instead of saying to the interviewer, well, what does your company do, and what would you want me to do? You already have an idea of what they do, and you can say, I know that your company sells this. And one of the things that you could take advantage of with my background is of product, or I know about this, or I've done the same thing, or I've had success in this particular area. And so I can bring that expertise and make it available to you. So that's one thing. Another suggestion that I have is that you can also typically find information about who's going to interview you and what their background is and about who they are. If you ask the question when that appointment is set up to interview, when you call in and say, I'd like to interview, or they call you and say, we got your resume and we'd like to interview you. Great. You set up the time. You say, by the way, who's going to be interviewing me? Who am I going to be talking with? Oh, well, you're going to be talking with Joe Blow. Well, now you can go to the internet and you can Google Joe Blow. Or you can go to LinkedIn and you can put Joe Blow in the search, and you can find out some things about him.
I'm going to pause you for a second and just say, folks, she was absolutely right about background checking the hiring manager who you'll be speaking with. But some of you have a tactical problem with using LinkedIn to find them because you may not be more sufficiently close connected to them to get any sort of useful information. So there's a Google custom search engine I developed that if you go to li-usa.info, It basically searches all the LinkedIn profiles in the United States and provides you with information from their profiles in order to be able to get the background info about the manager that you'll be speaking with.
I wrote that one down, Jeff. That's great.
Yeah. It's a nice little tool because for a lot of folks who have small networks who are interviewing or they're trying to go out and network, LinkedIn is of limited value to them because they're only connected to 12 people. And as a result, what this tool does is it opens up to everyone who's got a public profile on LinkedIn. If they're not on LinkedIn, you're not going to find them through this. But since almost everyone is, it's a great little resource. So again, li-usa.info. But that wasn't going to be my tip for this show, and we are going to come back to you in just a moment. But first, folks, I want to give you my insider tip for this show, which is about storytelling. Now, stories are not just simply for bedtime. It's not to put young kids down and help them get to sleep by boring them to tears. It is a great resource on interviews. But people sometimes make the mistake of only preparing one story for each situation that they might be asked about. So you know about behavioral interviews where they say, tell me about a time when you, and they describe some situation. You had a difficult user to help, or you had a person who's extremely demanding. How did you manage them? What did you do? Now, sometimes people's stories fall flat. And when they fall flat, if you're repeating the same story to the next person and the one after that, what you've done is reinforce the fact that you don't have a lot of experience in these situations. Preparing multiple stories allows you to switch off the story if you notice that the person that you're talking to at the first meeting, you're losing them. And then you have another story that you can tell to the next person. So that when they compare notes at the debrief afterwards, they can notice that you've told 2 or 3 stories, and thus you obviously have a lot of experience with this. So that's my insider tip for this show. Sorry, Hugh, to keep you hanging. Did 2 things there, but let's come on back and pick up where we left off.
All right. Well, one other thing that I wanted to share with you is that if you don't get enough information about company culture on the internet, one of the things that you can do is just go sit outside of the office building of the company that you're going to be interviewing with and going for a minute, especially right around 8, 9 o'clock in the morning when people are arriving for work. And the reason that I say that is one time I went to a job interview. I was dressed to the nines in a 3-piece suit and just really dressed up. And I walked into the office, and the manager of that particular branch was going to interview me. And he came up from behind his desk wearing tennis shoes and shorts and a T-shirt and looked at me and said, "Holy smokes, how come you're all dressed up? What did you think you were interviewing for?" And I did get the job, so it's better to dress up than down. But sometimes you can just, by going and observing for a half an hour, you can find out how the people who work there are dressing, and whether it's a blue-collar kind of situation that you're walking into, or whether people are dressed in suits, or whether they're dressed in kind of casual clothing that's a little bit upscale, and you can get an idea of how you want to dress for that interview.
Cool. So are there any other ways you suggest people prepare?
Well, yes, what we need to prepare to do is ask really great questions and very effectively communicate to that interviewer what's in it for the company and what's in it for that interviewer if they hire us to come to work. See, one of the things that I think people don't consider carefully enough is that the person who's interviewing you for that job, especially if they're in a lower level management position, their job, the person who hired them, the CEO of the company or the vice president of the company who assigned them that job, expects them to choose people who do a great job. And it reflects on the interviewer. If they hire somebody that turns out to be terrible at the job, it reflects on them, because now they've got to go find somebody else. They've got to hire them. They got to train them. And it costs money. And so there's something in it for the interviewer if that interviewer hires you and you do a great job. So you have to sell to that person. You have to convince them that you're going to do a tremendous job and that it's going to reflect well on them, and that you're going to be the best investment that company ever made by hiring you and paying you to do that particular job and fill that particular position. So all of that needs to be planned. You can't go in from the hip and expect that you're going to get maximum results.
It's funny, a client of mine once taught me that my job is to help make him look good. And as a person who's looking for a job, once you get to the chief poobah of the department, the executive who your future manager would report to, and you get invited for that interview. One of the things I realized a long time ago is that what that person really cares about is the circumstances under which he hears or she hears your name again. Because there are really three circumstances where that can occur. The first one is when they get the phone call that says, "They did a great job on this. Hey, I just want you to know that." The second one is review time. It's time to review you, and it's time to make a decision about your comp. And then the third one is, I'm just moving my fingers back on camera. The third one is you made a mistake, and it's a dreadful mistake, and someone's calling them up to complain about you. So they're sitting there because they don't want to ever hear your name again unless it's review time. So they just want to know you're going to be low concern, low maintenance. And there are little tricks I know that a person can do to demonstrate that to that executive and even to their immediate boss. But I digress and get off topic with that one. My apologies.
No worries. So the bottom line really is that the person who's doing the interviewing has a question in mind. And that question is, what's in it for me and what's in it for my company if I hire you? And that's the question that we need to answer when we go on a job interview, is what is in it for them. Too often, people go on job interviews and they have questions, but the questions are, well, how much are you going to pay me? How much vacation time do I get? What are the retirement benefits like? What kind of insurance plan do you have? And the salesperson or the person, the interviewee, is thinking, what's in it for me? But the questions that they're asking, it's all about the interviewee, not about the interviewer and the company. So if you can go into that interview with questions like, what's the most important challenge that needs to be solved in the position that you're interviewing for right now? What does the company really need from the person who does this particular job? How, if you hire me, what's the very first thing that you would want me to tackle, the very most important task? How can I be of service and of help in fulfilling the company mission, increasing sales, doing better marketing, better manufacturing, whatever it is that you're interviewing for? Ask how you can be of service, how you can help, what your role can be, and how you can help them solve their challenges. And if you're asking questions like that, what that interviewer sees is, here's somebody who's not just in it for a paycheck. They're already thinking about how they can make the company better, and that's the kind of employee that I want. I don't want somebody that's just going to show up for the job, put in their 8 hours, and go home and just sort of breeze through the day because they know they're going to get a paycheck and an insurance plan and a retirement plan and some vacation that's paid. One
of the questions folks have heard me suggest they use on an interview when they're asked, so do you have any questions for us, is the one where I invite them to say, so let's say you hire me and it's a year from now. And I haven't just done a good job. I've done a spectacular job. As a matter of fact, it's amongst the best you've ever seen someone do in a role like this. What would I have accomplished during that year that would cause you to write such a review?
Great question.
And what that does is, number one, is you get what their benchmarks are. So that number two, you can see if they're realistic or not. Because the last thing you as a job hunter want to do is join the staff working for some lunatic or some untenable situation where you're doomed to failure. Like a quick side story. I remember years ago, there was a person I interviewed who worked at pre-economic collapse AIG. And he called me up looking for a new job. What happened? Why are you looking? I didn't know when I joined that my predecessor had spent 80% of the money for this and only gotten 20% of the work done. So there was no way I was going to get the remaining 80% of the work done with so little money left. So, I'm looking because they hung me out to dry as the scapegoat. Well, wouldn't it have been nice if he had asked about where the project was and what his funding was like at that meeting, but he didn't.
Yeah. And another question that you can ask, provided that you're confident, is tell me why the person who was in the position that I'm applying for before me left. What made them decide to go someplace else? And the answer to that question is very often important. If the answer to that is just, well, they found a job that paid more money, then that's fine. Or, well, they retired, that's fine. If the answer to that question is they weren't performing in their job, then your follow-up question to that could be something very similar to what you just asked. And that is, well, if I were to be placed in that position, what would you want me to do differently from the person who was there before? And maybe that could even be the lead-off question. If you were to hire me, what would you expect me to do differently from the person who's held that position up until now? And you'll get a ton of information. You'll find out a whole lot about that position, and you might decide that you don't even want that position if the answer parameters, or you might find out exactly what you would need to do to be tremendously successful, and then you can circle right back and you could say, what you'll get if you put me in that position is somebody who does this or acts this way or has this talent or has this work ethic, whatever it is that person wasn't doing well that got them canned. You can assure them right off the bat that that's not you and that they're going to get something very different.
So I'm starting to think this selling thing that you're talking about really doesn't sound like a heck of a lot of selling. How do you see all of this as selling so far?
Well, I've basically just taken you through the first couple of steps in a good sales conversation.
Okay. There we have it.
And where we want to go from there is, since that interviewer is asking the question in their mind, what's in it for me and for my company if I hire this person, we need to very skillfully tell them what's in it for them. We need to answer that question, and we need to do it with you statements rather than I statements. So rather than going in and... Pardon me?
You statements?
You statements. So as an example, rather than going in and saying, well, I've been working at my previous job for the last 10 years, and I was the top salesperson in my company, and I did this and I did that, and I went here and I went there, and I can promise you that I'm going to be a great employee. Instead of doing that, you could say something like, you're looking for somebody who has a tremendous work ethic. And that's exactly what you're going to get from me. As a matter of fact, the job that I held previously, there was never a day that was missed. from the time I started working there until the time that I left. You're looking for somebody who puts in maximum effort, and you're going to get exactly that from me if you hire me for this position. I like to be the first one there and the last one to leave in the afternoon. So if you just preface it, you can say something about I, but make that come after you and what you said and what you want and what you need and what you're looking for in that position is this. That's exactly what you can have. You can get, you can have, you can be, you can do, you can learn, you can enjoy, you can take advantage of. Any of those are you statements. It's so unusual, even in sales, for us to hear that or see that in advertising, in marketing, or in selling. It's always about, we have the best program in the entire world, and I can do this, and I can help you do whatever, and I'm the best, and my customer service is great. And it's habitual in our society for us to sell that way. And that's one of the things that's different about the way that I try to teach people to sell, is that it's about the person who's the prospect. It's not about us. It's not about the person doing the selling. It's about the person that's being sold to. And in a job interview, it's the person who's interviewing you who's being sold to. So your focus is on them and help the company. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Gotcha. So far we did a lot on preparation, and we've spent some time on interviewing and things people might be able to say on interviews. What other forms of selling do you suggest people do as part of the job search process?
Tell me a little bit more about that. Tell me about what you mean by the job search process.
Sure. So a person's going out looking for a job. They're mailing out a resume. They're interviewing at places. They're trying to get firms to bite on them. They're trying to do networking. I could see networking as a sales process. What about you? Do you see it that way too?
I do. And one of the other sales skills that you can bring to networking or even to your resume is differentiation. People will be drawn to you if there's something about you that's just a little bit different from everybody else. Because not all job interviews are this way, but I know when I used to interview for some of the, I might get 50 or 60 resumes. And in going through those resumes, there were a few that really stood out. And of course, part of that had to do with their background and their experience and those kinds of things. But also just the way that they wrote. And again, you can use you statements in resumes. And instead of saying, I did this and I did that and I did the other thing, somebody in this particular position who does this and this and this, when you hire me, that's exactly what you get. Dependability, promptness, hard work, whatever it is that you see as being important in that particular position, and that the company, and when companies advertise, they tell you, we're looking for somebody who's a self-starter. Okay, well, you could just say, well, I'm a self-starter. Or, you could say, you're looking for a self-starter, somebody who doesn't have to be micromanaged. And with me, that's exactly what you can have.
I always laugh at terms like self-starter, team player, things like that, because until there's an advertisement that says, what we're really looking for is someone who is unmotivated and is a renegade. Until we see that job listing that calls attention to that, everything else is trite. So, like I said, no one ever asks for a renegade. No one ever asks for a lone wolf. They always want these personality types that are going to be conformist and, quote, fit in. And I must tell you, I hate when firms look for fit.
Yep.
All they're telling me is they're looking for people just like them who are not going to give them any independent thought. And besides, what sort of benchmark are they using to evaluate for fit other than, I really like this woman, or I really like this guy? Well, why? How does that determine fit? So, again, what am I...
So it's the same way the other way around. When the company is advertising for somebody to fill a position, they essentially, in that part of the process, are being the salesperson, and they're selling to somebody out there that they want, and they want certain things from that person, attributes in that person. And they could write the copy on their advertising for that position in a much different way and use you statements. You're a person who has this attribute. You are an independent thinker. You bring creativity to the process. You care about the company and the company's success. You're willing to work hard during the hours that you're here. You're willing to go the extra mile, blah, 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 blah. And what you receive when you work for us is you get this, and you get this, and you get this, and that entire advertisement can be a you statement on the other side of the coin.
You bet. We're starting to come up on the end of our time with one another today. Are there any other pointers that you think are pivotal that people should hear in terms of how to view the job search as a selling proposition?
Just one more tip, and that is when you go to a job interview, whether you get hired or whether you don't, send a thank you note to that interviewer and tell them you appreciated their time, that it was great to meet them, and that you certainly have an interest in that job if you do, and that you'd love to be the one that's chosen. And I'll tell you a story. I was interviewing a group of ladies to be executive assistants out in California when I was in the financial services industry. And I had somewhere around 65 or 66 resumes. And out of those resumes, I picked 5 people that were they were equal. And I interviewed all 5 of them, and Jeff, they were equal. I could hire any one of them, and they'd have done a fabulous job. They'd have just been marvelous in that position. I did the interview with one of the people, and the next morning when I came to work, stuck in my office door was an envelope with my name on it. And I opened that envelope up, and it was a thank you note from the woman that I had interviewed the previous day. And she just said, I had such a good time interviewing with you. Thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me. I sure would love to work for your company. I hope you choose me. I didn't get a note from anybody else I interviewed. Guess who I hired?
I think I got it figured out.
I hired the woman who left me the thank you note. And it's just so important. And oftentimes that will be just the little extra edge, the little thing, the little differentiation that I was talking about a minute ago, just the one thing that sets you apart from those other 66 resumes or those other 5 people who actually made the final interview. Just that one little tiny thing. And it probably took her 5 minutes to write out that little note and stick it in my door. And it meant that she got a really good paying job because of it.
Would you have had the same opinion if she'd sent you an email?
an email would have been okay, and it still would have differentiated her in that particular instance. There's just something about a handwritten thank you note, though, that sets people apart, because I get tons and tons and tons of email. I get hardly any snail mail. I have a whole lot of people stick a pretty little envelope in my doorway, and that was the deciding factor. That was the one little extra thing.
Sweet story. And Hugh, thank you so much for making time today. How can people get in touch with you and find out more about the work that you do?
There's two ways. They could go to redcapsalescoaching.com, and there are some blogs there, and there's a little wizard that you can click on and take a survey and have 45 minutes of my time absolutely free and no pressure and no obligation. So that's one way. Another thing that they could do is go to elitesalesacademy.com. And there's a video there that they can watch, and it's really the first in a series of 24 videos, sales training videos that are available. And they can watch that first one absolutely free. And if they like it and they think it's really cool and they want the other 23, they can take a couple of clicks and get those too. So those are really the two main ways.
Hugh, thank you again. I really appreciate it. And folks, we'll be back next time with someone else to help you with your job search. I'm Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter. I hope you enjoyed today's show. And if you did, come over to iTunes, give it a thumbs up, or 5 stars and a great review. Hope you feel it's worth 5 stars. And I must, in all honesty, tell you, I think it is. So come over to iTunes, give it 5 stars, a great review. And I also want to encourage you, visit my website, which is thebiggamehunter.us. There's a lot there. Over 1,000 videos about job search, and there are more about hiring. There's articles I've written. There's a complimentary subscription to my e-zine that you can receive there. A lot of great content to help you find work. So again, visit thebiggamehunter.us. Go exploring. Last thing, if we're not connected on LinkedIn, send a connection request at linkedin.com/IN/The Big Game Hunter. As long as you don't look like a spammer or scammer, I'll accept your connection request. I'm Jeff Altman. Have a great day. Take care.
For more job search advice, visit Jeff's website at thebiggamehunter.us. That's thebiggamehunter.us.